The morning rose over Jerusalem like a golden veil, spilling light over narrow streets and the imposing temple. The city's murmur mixed hurried footsteps, voices filled with urgency, and the distant sound of merchants opening their stalls. Between columns of stone and elongated shadows, a man walked in serenity. His bare feet touched the dust of the ground, but his gaze seemed already fixed on heaven. It was Jesus, coming from the Mount of Olives, where he had spent the night in prayer. While the world awoke to another ordinary day, he awoke to fulfill the will of the Father. There was a peace in his countenance that did not belong to this world, one no rumor of the crowds could disturb. The temple's cold marble contrasted with the living flame of his spirit. Men and women approached, some out of curiosity, others out of thirst for hope. They could not imagine that this morning would witness an act capable of crossing centuries, a moment where human justice and divine mercy would meet. Jesus, unhurried, entered the temple courtyard. The air seemed lighter where he passed, as if even the wind bowed to hear his words.
Amid the sound of footsteps, a different noise approached. It was not the song of birds, nor the gentle murmur of morning. It was a harsh, cutting sound, made of hardened voices and steps that crushed the earth with haste and anger. A crowd advanced, led by men in long robes, well-kept beards, and eyes narrowed by suspicion. Their faces bore the expression of bitter triumph, like those who carry a trophy not won with honor, but with a trap. Among them, dragged like a burden, was a woman. Her hair, once covered, fell disheveled over her face. Her hands trembled, her feet stumbled, and dust clung to her skin as a reminder of her fall. The Pharisees and scribes proclaimed loudly, "This woman was caught in the very act of adultery." Their eyes sought not justice, but a snare for the man from Nazareth. Among the crowd, some looked on with curiosity, others with thirst for condemnation. The temple, a place of prayer, became a stage for judgment. But Jesus, seated and serene, looked at them with the calm of one untouched by the urgency of hatred.
The Pharisees stopped before Jesus, forming a wall of accusation. They pushed the woman to the center like an object of scorn. She fell to her knees, face hidden in her hands, trying to escape the shame that burned like fire. One of them, with a voice heavy with feigned solemnity, spoke, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. What do you say?" Their words, loaded with intention, sounded like a trap. They sought not wisdom, but contradiction. If Jesus said, "Forgive her," he would be accused of breaking the law. If he said, "Stone her," he would deny his own message of love. The silence that followed was heavy as the stones in their hands. The sun began to rise higher, casting shorter shadows, as if even time held its breath. Eyes darted from Jesus to the woman, from the woman to the Pharisees, trying to guess the outcome. Hearts beat fast, not from a hunger for truth, but for a thirst for spectacle. The dust awaited the touch of justice or the weight of condemnation.
Jesus did not answer immediately. Instead, he bent down and began to write with his finger on the ground. Each trace he drew seemed to steal the breath from the accusations. We do not know what he wrote, perhaps names, perhaps sins, perhaps signs only heaven could understand. The crowd's murmur grew, restless with the master's silence, but he remained calm, as if the haste of men could not touch eternity. The Pharisees pressed him. "What do you say, Rabbi? The law is clear." The heat rose, but Jesus' gaze was like a breeze. Finally, he stood. His voice, gentle yet firm, cut the air. "Let the one among you who is without sin, be the first to throw a stone at her." There was no anger in his tone, no accusation, only truth, exposed like light in the middle of night. The weight of his words fell upon each heart like an invisible stone. Suddenly, the hands clutching rocks felt heavier. Silence returned. No longer the silence of waiting, but the silence of inner confrontation.
The first sound to break the silence was not a voice, but a stone. A dry thud echoed as the oldest accuser dropped his weapon. His face, once rigid, now carried the shadow of remorse. One by one, others followed. The stones, once ready to wound, fell into the dust, blending with the earth as if they had never been lifted. The accusers walked away slowly, avoiding the eyes of Jesus and the woman. It was as if each step took them not only away from the courtyard, but from truth itself. The younger ones hesitated, clinging to inherited anger, but even they yielded to the weight of their own guilt. The square emptied, whispers faded into the distance, the dust began to settle. At the center remained only two figures, the woman kneeling, and the man who held no stone in his hands, only compassion in his eyes. The morning was brighter now, and the light seemed to rest upon them like a silent blessing.
Only the two remained, and the sound of the woman's own heartbeat seemed to want to flee before she could. Jesus bent down again, not to write, but to lessen the distance. His gaze did not search her past. It was like an open window to a possible dawn. His voice, when it came, sounded not like a sentence, but like shelter. "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She slowly lifted her face, her eyes wet, and looked around as if waking from a nightmare. The courtyard, once full of shouted laws, was now a desert of silent stones. "No one, Lord," she whispered, with the reverence of one who finds life. Then, Jesus, with the simplicity that renews universes, said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." These were not words of indulgence, but of path, not a path guarded by fear, but guided by light. Shame lost its weight. Sin was no longer a shackle, but a point behind her. At the foot of the temple, between dust and promises, a woman was given back to herself, and God once again chose mercy as the highest form of justice.
She rose as one relearning her own height. Legs once weakened by humiliation now carried steps of return. Each step seemed to say to the ground, "I still can." The remaining crowd stepped aside with silent respect. There were no crowns nor applause, only a newfound freedom, discreet yet immense. As she walked, words engraved themselves within her, "Neither do I condemn you." There were not just sounds, but keys, opening long-locked doors. The memory of sin still existed, but now had company, the gaze of one who knows all and still loves. She thought of home, of eyes that would question, of neighbors who would whisper, of the market that would speak her name. Yet something in her knew the voice that mattered had already spoken. Jesus was back teaching, surrounded by simple people. She looked over her shoulder and saw him again, the man with no stone in his hands. There was no possession in his gaze, only sending. And it is sending that seals healing. "I do not bind you to the past, I entrust you to the future." She smiled faintly, the timid smile of one beginning to believe in her own dawn.
The stones on the ground bore the mark of fingers that had let them fall. The oldest had walked away first, perhaps because they had lived long enough to know guilt is not thrown without cost. The younger, whose haste often confuses zeal with violence, learned there a lesson no book teaches. Truth humbles sin without humiliating the sinner. Some scribes, hidden in the shadows of columns, chewed on defeat with the bitter taste of wounded pride. But the defeat that morning was not of Jesus over them. It was of falsehood over the human heart. The temple courtyard, so used to outward offerings, had seen the birth of an intimate sacrifice, the renunciation of accusation to embrace one's own reflection. A man who had once brandished a stone knelt far away, touched the dust with his forehead, and wept without sound. He discovered that there is no stone heavier than the need to appear righteous. And among whispers and dispersing steps, the memory of the phrase that froze arms and freed consciences lingered. Let the one without sin. The teaching was not theory. It was a gesture. And true gestures remain even when voices fall silent. No one loved the law as Jesus did. He fulfilled it by lifting it to its intended purpose, life. The letter that condemns without healing becomes a prison. The spirit that reveals truth to set free is the way. Go and sin no more is not an impossible demand. It is a promise embedded in grace. You can go because you are loved. You can refrain because you have been reached. The justice of the kingdom is not fed by public executions, but by intimate rebuildings. And mercy is not moral discount. It is the strength that raises what guilt has cast down. There, in the trace of a finger on dust, eternity wrote in a language all understand. No one is defined by their worst day when God intervenes. The adulterous woman ceased to be the label others hung on her. She became a daughter again. And the accusers, if they willed, ceased to be weary judges. They could begin again as brothers. The law, at last, was fulfilled in love, not as permissiveness, but as truth that heals. The temple was, for a moment, a house of living people. Those who erred, those who judged, and the one who saves them all.
Perhaps you who hear this story carry invisible stones in your pockets, heavy memories, broken promises, words that wounded, secrets that burn in the dark. Perhaps you have also been the target of pointed fingers, short-sighted eyes, hasty sentences. The scene in Jerusalem returns to speak into your now. There is a place between dust and hope, where the voice of Christ still reaches. He does not bargain with the evil that destroys us. He disarms it with truth and restores us whole. If this is your time to drop stones, let them fall. If it is your time to lift your face, let your eyes rise. For go is the verb of those who have a future, and sin no more is the courage born from meeting love. The courtyard empties, the city moves on, but those who have crossed this mercy never walk the same again. In the dust where secrets were written, new steps bloom. Let your life be the quiet continuation of that morning. Less haste to judge, more readiness to welcome. Less noise of condemnations, more music of new beginnings. And if guilt visits you, remember, there is a man with no stones in his hands, waiting for you.